after Texas and Oklahoma accepted the offer to go over to the SEC and join the SEC, which again is going to be official starting in 2025, it's put the other major conferences in a bit of a pickle as the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and the ACC are now kind of trying to find a way to compete because there's are two big schools who just went to the SEC. The SEC has so much of a consolidation of talent and schools at this point that it's difficult for these other conferences to compete. Every year, the SEC, they're the ones sending the teams to, majority of the time, they're the ones sending the teams over the college football playoff. They're Alabama, LSU, and then Georgia are the ones in the national championship game. And there's also a huge SEC bias that we already know exists in college football. It's no secret. We don't have to hide it. But it is being reported that the commissioners of the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big Ten have held discussions about forming an alliance between the three conferences in the wake of the Texas and Oklahoma news. Just a few weeks ago, the Pac-12 commissioner, George Kilovkov, I think I said that right, met with the Big 12 commissioner to discuss the potential options between the two conferences, and it appears that the Pac-12 is now shifting towards talks with other conferences after those talks kind of broke down, and it looks like the alliance between the three would mainly benefit all parties, and the only thing that's holding it back, though, is the scheduling. And the thing is, scheduling out these games and these interconference games, even if this merger were to happen, would be very difficult because you would have schools from all of these sides of the country kind of having to fly over, and then it would mess up a lot of other schedules as well. It would mess up basketball because if you merge conferences, then you merge conferences for all sports. So it would be a bit tricky actually figuring out the logistics. If we're being honest, it would take a few years, at least one or two, to legitimately figure out all the logistics of how it would work. We're talking about three big-time college football conferences all coming together to make a huge super conference, a cross-country super conference. That is an insane idea just to begin with, but actually implementing that would be even more difficult. And you got to think, is this the right move for these conferences? I think it's the right move to think about it because at this point, it is the SEC all the way up here, and then the Big Ten, Ohio State basically up right here, and then all the Pac-12, the other Big Ten schools just below them. It is tough. It is legitimately tough for any team to compete with not only the bias, but the competition, or any conference rather, to compete with the competition that exists in the SEC. They get the top of the top, the creme de la creme as far as talent. They get the best recruits. They get a lot of funding. They get a lot of publicity. They get a lot of attention, way more attention than these other conferences. And it is a little unfair as far as we're talking about, these conferences when schools are leaving, when you have two huge schools like Texas and Oklahoma leaving, it puts the Pac-12 in a difficult position. It puts the Big Ten in a difficult position because even though they're not involved in these two schools in any way, it affects them because the SEC just got even bigger. And the Big Ten are their only other real comparable rival, at least before this move. Now it's not even close. Now the SEC is just all over the top. Just they're so much better at this point. And and the other big question that coming out of this is why would you do this? And it's very simple. If you're a fan, you want to see something happen. You want to see something happen to not only root out the SEC bias, but actually compete with the SEC as far as it being the top conference in college football, because it's getting to a point where there is no parity amongst these other conferences. There's no parity at all. There already was no parity really in college football. But, we were talking about schools like, Boise State and University of Central Florida. They would, even though they would go undefeated for years, they would never get a chance in the national championship game. But now we're talking about there's going to be schools like, Michigan and other schools who are going to be held to an even higher standard than they were before. And these are huge schools in the Pac-12 and the Big Ten who are going to be held to a higher standard than they were before compared to the SEC. because everyone just knows the SEC is better. Everyone thinks the SEC is better. Everyone just sees college football through the realm of the SEC. And this news makes that even more true. So these conferences have to find a way to do something. It doesn't need to be an all-out merger. I think there's a way to do it where you keep the individual conferences, but you agree to interconference play between the three conferences to kind of make the competition a little more robust than it would be. Because let's be honest, USC, you're going to be held to a hugely different standard than you were a year ago or in 2025. That's just true, because the SEC is over the top at this point. And you know who loses? You know who loses when this stuff happens? You know who loses when all of this kind of stuff happens, when one conference dominates everyone? College football fans. Because now there's already a lot of teams who they watch their team every year do great, and then they know they don't have a chance. That's only going to increase as the SEC continues to consolidate all of these schools. And there's a lot of rumors that they're not done. They want to create a super conference in the SEC. And it could get to the point where the SEC just has their own championship game and their own championship tournament, and that becomes the college football championship. I might sound like a doomer. I might sound like whatever, but it's true. It is true. These are legitimate discussions that have been had and that people have honestly been having for a long time, but we're just starting to realize that these conversations have a little more reality, have a little more bite to them than we originally thought. So this is a story that if you're a fan of college football, you should definitely pay close attention to, because it doesn't just affect, the Big Ten, the ACC. It affects everyone. If you like a college football team, if you're a huge fan, even Notre Dame, which at this point is the last big independent school, they're going to be forced into a position where they need to increase their level of competition comparatively to the SEC. That's just truth. Even a school that's held to such a standard like Notre Dame, they're going to be held to a higher standard. And what are they going to do? They're not even in a conference. They're going to have to find a way to make it work. So I don't like the move of Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC, if I'm being honest, because it does exactly what the worst thing there is you can do to a sport. It creates less parity. I just spent the past month talking about how the NBA this year had just got so much better because there's parity, because there's a more equal division of talent, especially now so in the East. And we're seeing the exact opposite happen in college football. There's just talent consolidating in one conference. Everyone sees that one conference. Everyone focuses on that one conference, and nothing else outside of it matters, or, outside of maybe Ohio State, outside of them, nothing else really matters. So this is big news. And I hope they find a way to do something here as far as creating some sort of partnership, because they're going to need to for their own business survival too. The SEC is just going to own everything, and they're just going to be too big. Thanks for watching this video from Real Take Sports Talk. Remember to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. Also, remember to check out our live show every single Thursday at 8 p.m. right here on the YouTube channel. And remember, keep it real.